The Great Steppe, millenniums of events, hundreds of nomadic tribes and people. They lived, worked, made discoveries, conquered large tracts of lands, and left us some mysteries. To learn more about it, watch the project called Enigma of the Great Steppe. At the beginning of 1872, a Russian officer arrived at the nomad camp of one of the sultans of East Kazakhstan. Unlike other travelers, this military man spoke fluent Kazakh and knew something about nomads' customs and traditions. As Captain Ivan Andreev is written later, superiors have sent him as an envoy with the letters of Kyrgyz Kazakh's middle horde to the owner of the Naiman tribes. Nothing more is known about this secret mission, apart from the fact that the officer was going around the Naiman villages, recording stories about the origins of the nomadic tribes and aristocratic dynasties of the Middle Rus. Once Andreev found himself near the Ayaguz River, noticed some ancient construction and entered it. Inside, he has seen something that later was remembered by other travelers and inspired a number of theories and retellings. Inside it were three statues, one male, another female. While the male statue was depicted with its hands down, female statue had its own one hand down and the other pressed to its chest. In accordance with traditions, Kyrgyz would approach the statue and put their offerings into its hand. The third statue was placed next to the wall, facing the window. All of them were human height, made of stone. Captain Ivan Andreev became the first ever researcher who in the end of the 18th century has described one of the most famous buildings in the steppe, a mausoleum dedicated to the protagonist of famous epos, Kozy Korpesh, and his beloved Bayan Sulu. It was their stone incarnation that the officer saw when he was studying the monument. A century after Captain Andreev's expedition, ancient sculptures have mysteriously disappeared. But what did the other officer, Chokan Walikhanov, draw? How many sculptures were there and why they were considered non-Kazakh? And how old is the history of creation of human figures out of solid rocks?
Есть такая монументальная скульптура, да? И есть мелкая пластика.
There is monumental sculpture and there is small form sculpture. Probably the earliest examples of sculptures, sculptural forms, and anthropomorphic images belong to small form sculpture. These were the works made of bone and clay. They can be dated back to the Paleolithic, the Stone Age. Well, and the first ever known to science depictions of vertical human-like stone figures can be dated back to ancient times. It could be the Chalcolithic or the Bronze Age, a couple of thousands years ago. And then the sculptures that became the traditions certain nations were following are related to Scythian times. These were the sculptures of ancient Turkic people. From ancient times, let's travel to 1856 to the land of Kazakhs, or as they were called then, Kyrgyz Kazakhs. In that year, another officer has specifically traveled to a famous mausoleum located near the Ayaguz River. It was the first Kazakh scholar, Chokan Walikhanov. Unlike Captain Andreev, Chokan Chingizovich found there 4 stone idols, and here's how he depicted them. The majority of scholars believe that these statues are related to Kozy Korpesh, Bayan Sulu's sister, and her brother's wife, Jin Kia. Many decades later, other scholars will visit this place and manage to take photographs of the monument and mysterious stone figures. By the way, they have noticed that there could be not just 4, but more stone idols. These statues are, without any doubt, Kalmyk made, as Kyrgyz, Kazakhs, being Muslims, don't have a custom of making stone statues near the tombs. But how these statues ended up at Kozu Kurpech's grave is hard to explain. So what is the reason why so many scientists were fascinated by the origins of the statues discovered in a distant Kazakh steppe and on the banks of the Ayaguz River in particular? The thing is that by the beginning of the 20th century, the phenomenon of stone sculptures was one of the most interesting in science. Today we see them in museums mostly. But it is worth imagining them in a natural landscape. Then you can partly comprehend what an indelible impression they were making on the pioneer travelers. And today only a few can boast of seeing ancient sculptures in their natural habitat. As an illustrator and photographer, I've dedicated a lot of time to archaeology. I've been working in this sphere for more than 30 years. Not so many cultures have as many portraits of their ancestors as the Turkic people. There's a big collection of stone idols in Taraz. I started to take pictures of them in the 90s. There are dozens of statues there. Once you start looking at them closer, you notice more details, like, for instance, a smiling face, a stone figure that is smiling. There are different faces. When you look at a stone woman, you understand that her whole life she was dissatisfied. There's another stone idol, a surprise face, gazing into the space. The point is that all these emotions that the artist was able to transmit, they are astonishing. At the beginning, one might think that they are all the same, but they are all different. Who created these statues and why they were placed near kurgans, burial places, or on the side? This tradition is associated with the tribes and people who have lived in the vast lands of the steppe at different periods. Modern science associates ancient small-form sculpture with religious beliefs based on the ideas of soul's immortality and afterlife. This is where cult of the dead and ancestors originated from. Let's ask the experts and with their assistance find out how rich is the collection of stone idols in Kazakhstan and what eras it represents. Scythian sculptures are about 2,000 to 2,500 years old. Some of them were discovered on the territory of southern Ukraine and Russia. Sculptures that are related to this period, Sarmatian sculptures, were recently found in Kazakhstan, Mangistau region. The grandiose ritual complex Baite contains several dozen sculptures made of sufficiently solid materials, and at the same time, materials that were easy to process. That complex introduced us to several dozen interesting sculptures. Well, and the largest series of sculptures belongs to the ancient Turkic people, the earliest of which are dated back to the 5th to 6th centuries AD. And the latest, the so-called Polovtsian or Kipchak sculptures of the south of Ukraine and Russia, are the sculptures of the 11th, early 13th centuries. But how can the information about sculptures of different eras help in solving the mystery of the stone idols from the mausoleum of Kozy Korpesh and Bayan Salu, and what the oirots have to do with that? Also, what details allow to trace the roots of ancient tribes' nomadic migrations? Thinking of the origins of the Ayaguz sculptures, scholars focused on the epos, shape and construction of the mausoleum. Approximately, it belongs to the 10th to 11th centuries. This period is associated with the fall of the Kimok Khaganate and the establishment of the rule of the Kipchak Khans. The Kazakhs have preserved dozens of versions of the poem about the tragic love of Kozy Korpesh and Bayan Salu. All of them are associated with the Kalmyks, or as they were called before, oirots. The Kalmyk Batyr Kodar, trying to win Bayan's heart, treacherously killed Kozy Korpesh and then died from the hands of Morning Beauty. Those who were used to perceive the Oirots as villains will probably be surprised at the hypothesis of the Orientalist Joseph Antoine Castanier. He believed that stone idols were made by Kalmyks to honor Kodar's memory and the memory of other heroes who fell in the fight against the Kyrgyz. This would be by no means a contradiction to the story, since the place of the fight and the place of the death of both heroes is the same place where the monument to Kozy Korpesh was erected. Another version that bears a significant interest was introduced by another authority in archaeology, Vasily Radlov. He believed that stone figures have nothing to do with the monument of Kozy Korpesh, and probably they're 1,000 years older than the monument. Scholars of the 21st century, armed with the knowledge from the history of nomadic costume, have their own theory.
По головным уборам этих скульптур было видно, что это классические кипчакские скульптуры.
Judging by the headwear sculptures are depicted with, it is clear that these were classical Kipchak sculptures. This is the type of headwear that is reproduced in the so-called Polovtsian sculptures of the south of Russia and Ukraine. So these are the only sculptures of the type that have been preserved on the territory of Kazakhstan, and unfortunately, they have vanished into thin air, and we can't even understand what happened to them. But they provide very interesting data, giving historians the opportunity to trace how and when the Kipchaks moved from the depths of Central Asia, southern Siberia, and Altai. Through Altai, they crossed the Irtysh and moved westward, through the north of the Aral Sea, the Caspian Sea, and all the way until their first groups reached Hungary. Thus, the shape of headwear allowed scholars to narrow down the time period stone idols belonged to. When the sculptures are studied, everything is essential: face shape, shape of the eyes, haircut, pose, and many other important details. There are certain stone idols that feature lots of details. It can be a belt with different weapons attached to it, or braids, and men used to have them too. Sometimes earrings. Both female and male sculptures had them. There can also be different kinds of headwear, various details of clothing. All of these is very important for scholars. The pose of the lost sculptures and objects they were holding in their hands prove the theory that these stone idols are related to the Kipchak period. What is the difference? Sculpture of the Saka period. During the Saka period, one statue was put in kurgan-like structures. And in the Kipchak period, there were a number of sculptures from 1 to 5, and they were placed in one kurgan. This is the first difference, and the second is iconography. As you see here, in the Kipchak period, the statue was always depicted with a vessel that was held with both hands near the chest. It is bitter to comprehend the fact that the granite figures have disappeared from Mazar, but unfortunately it is not surprising. Even the Soviet art critic Alexei Fyodorov-Davidov once said, "Stone statues have long attracted the attention of Russian people and served as a symbol of the nomadic dominance over the steppe." There were times when these stone idols were used for all kinds of purposes. As it turned out, house foundations were made of them. People did not realize that they were valuable cultural heritage of the whole mankind. So who was involved in the disappearance of the stone idols? What Africa governor has to do with that? And what was the riddle that ancient sculpture has posed to famous archaeologists Margulan and Kilslasov? On the southern side of Kozy Korpesh monument, there were rubbles and debris of stone idols. For now, only one stone idol's body was preserved. There were more unbroken idols before, but they were all battered and stolen recently. In 1897, one stone idol's head was picked up by a German East Africa general governor, Major von Wisman, who visited this monument and took the head with him. The African traces in the history of the sculptures is the most unusual theory. This is another lead. In 1866, Lieutenant General ethnographer Alexander Gaines was visiting East Kazakhstan. In his diary, he was complaining that the Cossacks pulled these statues out from the monument, decapitated them, and mutilated. According to other sources, back then, one of the Russian scholars was planning to keep the ancient figures intact and wanted to transfer them to the Moscow History Museum, but did not receive the support of the local authorities, who then willingly helped to send 2 statues to Germany. The name of the president of the Imperial Academy of Sciences, Count Uvadov, emerges in the case. We have archive sources, Count Uvadov's, and it is said that African Count wanted to take with him part of the sculpture, but we don't have proofs telling us exactly if he has taken them or he hasn't. There is also information saying that the sculptures were supposed to be taken to Russia, and yet again, we don't know for sure. The source was lost. It is said that the stone idols were shipped to the Irtysh, and what was then? We don't know if the sculptures were delivered further or not. Perhaps one day traces of missing figures will be found. In any case, a similar story happened to another sculpture, famous in the scientific community. Let's move to Ulitau, the geographical center of Kazakhstan. Here, in the valley of the Zhangabil River, right near Kurgan, a statue was found. What makes its story so interesting is the fact that scientific luminaries Alkay Margulan and Leonid Kilzlasov dated it differently. And then it has disappeared for 30-something years. And just recently, the sculpture was found, and not just somewhere, but in the Almaty Museum of Folk Musical Instruments. Scholars Lubov Ermolenko, Zholdasbek Kurmangulov, and Asimgul Kasyanova introduced a new hypothesis, according to which the statue was much older than the Soviet archaeologists once thought.
The
history of this stone begins in 1948. The statue was discovered by the first Kazakh archaeologist Alkay Hakanovich Margulan when he was studying in the Ultau region. He also studied the construction in the statue together, and he dated it to the period of the 6th to 8th century. This statue was also studied by Kizlasov in 1948. In 1951, they have published an article together. But in the article, Alkay Hakanovich Margulan said that this was a shaman statue. He has also described iconography, saying that it was the image of kobuz, a musical instrument. And Kizlasov described the object as a bow. In 2015, we re-examined the sculpture and decided that these were completely different images: a tool, a dagger, and a solar sign. Well, they have also thought of a solar sign, but they said it was a shaman's tambourine, and we made the assumption that this statue was remade, a deer stone remade in the early Iron Age. The early Iron Age, by iconography and by analogy, we dated it back to the 7th to the 5th century BC. This is the Saka period. The ancient sculpture posed a hard riddle to scholars. On the rear side, he has left a sign that Margulan took for shaman's tambourine. Kizlasov assumed it was a tamga, whereas other scholars thought of an earring. And even the authors of a new theory emphasized that the study should be continued. Now let's go back to the lost stone idols. The fact that initially they were placed inside the mazar makes them unique among other architectural monuments of Kazakhstan. The search for same sculptures leads us to the famous temple of the 7th to 8th centuries in Mongolia, located on the Orkhon River and dedicated to the commander Kul Tigin, co-ruler of Bilge Khagan. Same as in the mausoleum of Kozy Korpesh in Bayan Salu. There's a pair of statues, male and female, in the Orkhon complex. I ordered to put an eternal stone here, and if my stone is still there, in the steppe, on the crossroads of paths and nomadic ways, there is only one reason to it, so that everyone can see it. Bilge Khagan has approved of it. Look at it, read the writings. Here I have erected an eternal stone. Someone or something did not spare the stone incarnation of the Turkic Hagan. Luckily, the head of the statue is discovered in the monument excavations. Face like this is unlikely to be forgotten, and it is highly unlikely to use the outdated term, stone woman, when speaking about this character.
Прежде всего, вот это многообразие обликов этих скульптур.
First of all, the variety of shapes of these sculptures provokes one thought, that in ancient Turkic society this was a real person, a hero, ruler, batir or someone else. It was a real person whose name was glorified for some special edifying purposes.
Персонаж, которого возвеличивали во имя, так сказать, каких-то особых назидательных целях. Балбал.
Balbal. There is still an ongoing dispute between scholars, but the majority of researchers of the ancient Turkic sculpture recently agreed that the Balbal doesn't necessarily mean sculpture, but a certain sign, a certain image, a certain symbol of the enemy that was destroyed by that personality, that hero, who was a real person and who is buried in or near this sculpture.
Того врага, которого уничтожил вот тот вот персонаж, тот герой, который, в общем-то, и является вот этим вот реально существовавшим человеком, похороненным в данной или около данной вот этой скульптуры. И только в редчайших случаях это как...
And only in rare cases, as in the case of the Kul Tigin burial complex, where several anthropomorphic sculptures were placed in front of the sculpture of Kul Tigin.
Скульптуры самого Культигина.
Moreover, the sculptures didn't look similar, and they were put in front of him as Balbals.
И похожих друг на друга скульптур, которые поставлены были перед ним именно в качестве балбала. Это были не просто некие враги какие-то.
These were not just any enemies, they were concrete enemies against whom he fought and whom he defeated, and whom he killed himself or with the army.
Лично Тони Кук или его армия. А вот в качестве балбалов.
But instead of Balbals that indicated the number of killed enemies, vertical pillars were placed sometimes.
Некий каменный обрубок. И вот перед могилами крупных.
And in front of the graves of the greatest warriors and often leaders, it did not mean that they killed them personally. A string of Balbals was placed, scattered in the area, sometimes over several kilometers.
На несколько километров. До 2,5 километров.
Up to 2.5 kilometers. And just imagine they were standing with a distance of 1.5 meters from each other, meaning they were a couple of thousands of people. It is possible that the following Chokan Ualikhanov's entry was mentioning Balbal's remnants, located near Kozy Korpesh and Bayan Salu construction. There is a grave pillar one verse to Ayaguz, and next to it there's a hideous stone idol of Kodar, Kozu Kurpech, his opponent. By the time Ualikhanov drew figures from the Mazar of Kazakh Romeo and Juliet, his people have stopped erecting stone idols. Actually, the Mongol invasion has stopped this tradition of erecting anthropomorphic sculptures in the 13th century. After the 13th century, neither Kipchaks nor Turkic tribes, who continued to live on the territory of Kazakhstan, did not produce sculptures like these. With the spread of Islam, depiction of humans disappeared, and only in central and eastern Kazakhstan, where Islam was introduced later, the tradition of making stone idols continued for some time. Who knows? The figures from the Ayaguz mausoleum might have been the last ones the local craftsmen made. Honestly, I even feel sorry that this tradition at some stage was interrupted and remained in the depths of centuries. It could have continued to this day. But I hope that time will pass and maybe it's me daydreaming. But I want to see these sculptures back in place, and we'll drive by and see them. Standing there like the Stonehenge, we are always thinking of cliches, where our stone idols will stand and we will be able to see them in their natural habitat. In different periods of time, wanderers have repeatedly seen new stone idols in the steppe, but the ancient figures from the mausoleum of Kozy Korpesh and Bayan Salu were destined for a special fate. They reminded about some important events from the nomads' past. They didn't let us forget about a beautiful love story, and even having disappeared, stone sculptures continue to excite those who are passionate about the mysteries of the Great Steppe.